back to an invisible illness awareness project. Before we get into this week's video, I just wanted to say that typically when I do these type of videos where I go so in-depth on a particular diagnosis, explaining how it works and everything, I like to verify what I'm saying just to make sure that my own understanding is correct and I don't mislead you guys in any way. And I actually got my information for this from a lot of different sources and just sort of combined a lot of things. I would still say that the best source is ME Action. I felt that they went a lot more in depth and had more scientific information and cited their sources. The others might do that as well, but I probably just didn't see that information. However, I like to compile everything here because I know it can be really exhausting for a lot of people to have to find these sites on their own and figure out which sites are reliable and siphon through all the information to find what they're looking for. So hopefully this helps having it here. For a lot of people, it's also easier to just listen instead of having to read everything. If you would like to see my notes, you can become a patron on Patreon and I will have them uploaded there for you guys if you prefer to have them in writing. Otherwise, without further ado, here goes. So, key symptoms for ME are debilitating fatigue or extreme exhaustion that is constant or reoccurring and made worse by either physical or mental exertion. It has to be something that developed, so it doesn't apply if you were born with a low level of energy, and it has to persist for at least 6 months. This symptom is typically referred to as post-exertional malaise, or PEM, because instead of it being an immediate response, it doesn't tend to turn up until much later. Post-exertional malaise comes along with a worsening of all other symptoms and can cause permanent damage. While experiencing post-exertional malaise, you might have difficulty speaking, reading, communicating, worse pain than usual, and sometimes it's like you're basically paralyzed. Yeah, for me, sometimes I really can just lay there and do absolutely nothing until it passes. And for some people, it could take days, weeks, or months to return to where they were before that crash. This is definitely true for me. If I get out and try to do something physical, I'll be exhausted, but there are also days where I stay in and I'm reclined the whole day, and yet I still feel totally exhausted. Non-restorative sleep. After a full night of sleep, feeling like you haven't slept at all, or like you have a hangover, problems falling asleep or staying asleep, and needing time to transition from sleeping to being awake. In my case, I definitely have something of an inverted sleep schedule where if I've got nothing else going on, I prefer to be nocturnal. Even if I don't have anything else going on, I'm typically up very late, waking up tired and needing to take a nap just because I didn't get enough sleep. If I don't stay up really late, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. If I do stay up really late, sometimes I'll wake up in the early morning and just be so tired that I'll lay there until I get back to sleep. But when I say sleepy or tired in that sense, I'm not referring to the actual fatigue, or what's also called malaise and exhaustion. I do often need this time to transition from sleeping to waking. I remember like being a kid having to get up early for school and you really didn't want to wake up. That I don't have at all anymore. If I have to wake up early, my alarm is set, I wake up, it's not a problem. And as long as I'm laying there, I actually do feel well rested. But as soon as I get up, I really feel like this heaviness in my body, and it's like I need to lay back down and rest again. As soon as I get out the shower before I actually get up and go anywhere. And once I have been out and I've exerted myself, I come back and take a nap. And when I wake up, I'll have an elevated temperature, this sort of like feverish, achy feeling, and then I will actually have to lay there for maybe like 30 minutes before that feeling subsides and I feel like I can actually get up. Orthostatic intolerance is when your symptoms get worse when you're standing or sitting. I know for sure that when I'm out of it, even if I'm reclining on a pillow in bed, that is too much, and sometimes I just have to lay completely flat. There are times when I feel rested, like I can stand up, and then just standing there for a few minutes, I already feel the energy just drain out of me, and I need to sit down again. So these core symptoms need to be present at least 50% of the time for a period of at least 6 months for diagnosis to be made. Studies have found that susceptibility to IMI may be genetic, so if you have a first-degree relative with IMI, then you're twice as likely to develop it yourself. Other symptoms can include muscle and joint pain, muscle weakness, sore throat, swollen lymph nodes, sensitivity to light, sound, vibration, smell, touch, chemicals, foods, medications, and temperature, headaches, easily bruising, and vertigo. Personally, I deal with a lot of back pain. I've had tendonitis in my wrists. I've had intolerance to cold where it would feel like my toes would go numb and I would be shivering even though it's 15 degrees and it wasn't really cold. By the time it gets down to 5 degrees, I feel like I can't tolerate it at all. I can't be outside and I'm wearing thermal layers and stuff. Muscle weakness for sure. I think that I probably have above average muscle strength in general, but because of this illness I just have this weakness where it's I can't actually use my strength. Sensitivity to sound is something that really only affects me when I'm really out of it. There are people who just feel sensory overload from too much noise, and I love to have music blasting right in my ears really loud while I'm doing something else. But during part of the period where I was at my worst, I was living in a dorm, and when they were partying or all gathered in the kitchen and everything was really loud, I would just leave because I couldn't deal with it. Now what really bothers me is having the TV on, especially when it's really loud or it's a children's series and it's really over the top. It's just it's exhausting to even hear it even if I'm not really engaged with it. Smell and chemicals I kind of combine because it's usually the smell of chemicals that bothers me. More natural smells don't bother me, chemical cleaners definitely affect me, but if I get organic cleaners, it's okay. Food, a lot of food intolerances, very limited there. Medication, same thing. It's basically any medication I try, either it does nothing at all or I don't tolerate it. Headaches, yeah, especially if I try taking a new medication that should help, I'll usually end up getting migraines so that I have to stop taking it. So it really is a spectrum disorder. People are so severe that they're bedbound and they can't feed themselves, they can't talk, or some people can only deal with any sort of online interaction or conversation for 15 minutes a day. There's people who have to choose between brushing their teeth or brushing their hair, but then there are also people who are mild or moderate, and you might actually have a moment where you feel oh, I don't feel anything, I feel fine, I feel normal, and you get excited and you think, oh, maybe I'm cured now, and then it hits you again. Typically within a few hours or days of exertion, you experience a crash, which is the post-exertional malaise. The crash can last anywhere from several hours to days to weeks. Personally, after I travel, I kind of crash for several days, but in a typical week, I might be able to do one thing on Monday and I'm okay, then I could do one thing on Tuesday and I'm okay, but then I wake up Wednesday morning and it's no. Yeah, but then if I've just been traveling somewhere, then it'll take me 3 days to recover. And maybe it'll be just one day where I have this heavy feeling where I have to be completely reclined, but then the next day I'll be laying there thinking, oh, I'm okay, I can get up, and then as soon as I get up, I feel it again. During the crash, people often experience hoarseness, feeling of exhaustion, brain fog, achiness, headaches, cold flashes, nausea, vomiting. So another major problem with ME, and part of the reason why so little is known about it, is because research is not being funded. In the US, IMI ranks in the bottom 5% of NIH funding, which is the National Institute of Health, which means it receives less than $6 million a year of funding. To put that in perspective, diseases with a similar burden and prevalence receive about $200 million a year. There's also a quote from the 2015 National Academy of Science Institute of Medicine report, which said there's an essential need for more research. Remarkably little research funding has been made available, especially given the number of people afflicted. Okay, in the UK, IMI receives less than 1% of all grants given to funding agencies. However, IMI has been proven to be more disabling than MS, which is multiple sclerosis, yet it receives 20 times less research funding per patient. So, of course, if there's hardly any research being done, there's hardly any education of healthcare professionals happening, there's no treatment either. There have been some biological markers that have been tested to see if they indicate IMI, but they haven't been confirmed yet. So there's no actual fail-safe way to diagnose it. You just have to go based off of symptoms and ruling out everything else. And there's also no treatment, so basically you just have to focus on managing your symptoms as best you can. And the best way to do that is to use an app or diary to keep track of what you do and your response so that you can clearly see what's causing you to crash and how bad the crash is, and try to adjust so that you're not overdoing it. There are also people who will wear these smartwatches that will track your blood pressure and heart rate so that you have a set number that is safe, and you can see when you go beyond that, and that'll give you a warning that you need to slow down. That's one thing I'm definitely interested in, but I've heard from people that do that you still can't get through life without overexerting yourself to some degree. On average, people with IMI have a lower quality of life score and are more disabled than people with diabetes, colon cancer, multiple sclerosis, and chronic renal failure. 1 in 4 people is housebound. However, the severity in a single patient can fluctuate over an extended amount of time and just from moment to moment. Meaning that just because you see someone out and about and they look fine, that doesn't actually mean that they're healthy or faking being sick. They're probably faking being well. Some people are very sensitive and are isolated in a dark room where they can never get out of bed and have to cover their eyes and their ears when someone comes in because they're so sensitive to light and noise. Some people can get better over time. Some people can get worse over time, especially if they push themselves. There's no cure. As far as we know, only about 5% of people actually make a full recovery. A lot of people might improve somewhat, but they'll still be limited and not actually 100%. So the best approach is to manage your symptoms as best you can. Pace yourself. Don't overexert yourself. Common comorbid conditions that a lot of people with ME have are postural tachycardia syndrome, also known as POTS, and orthostatic intolerance, which is OI, hypermobility and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, mast cell activation disorder, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, fibromyalgia, celiac disease. That one I don't have, but I do have a gluten intolerance, primary sleep disorder, allergy and chemical and food intolerances, which would show up in your IgE or IgG blood work, or, of course, secondary depression from losing any semblance of a life and being completely isolated. Not to be confused with depression causing ME. I know that was a lot to take in, but that's all I got for now. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Next week, I'll be getting more into detail about my own experience, about how I got sick and what's happened since then. So I will see you guys then.